Hello, I'm Father Charles Connor from Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Join us as we begin our study of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Hello, and welcome to this new series, which we are titling A Study of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I'm Father Charles Connor from Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Emmitsburg, Maryland, a priest of the Diocese of Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I very much want to welcome you to this new series in which we are going to take an in-depth look at a very, very remarkable book which has been with us now for some years. And let me say right at the very beginning, right at the outset of this series, that there are two books which belong in every single Catholic home in the United States of America and every single Catholic home in the world. The first book is a Catholic version of the Bible, the Scriptures, a Catholic version of Scripture. And the second book, which belongs in every single solitary Catholic home throughout the world, is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I wonder how familiar this book is to many of you watching this program. I hope you've seen it. I hope you've read it, studied it, and even prayed over it as a spiritual book, because it is good for all of these many, many purposes. And in this series now, as I say, we are going to be looking in depth at this remarkable text, which really makes us proud to be Catholics because it explains to us the great truths of our faith. It explains to us why we are Catholic. So, to begin our story in this series, we go back to the year 1985. The Second Vatican Council had been over for 20 years, and we had problems. And many people throughout the Church Universal knew we had problems. The first one who knew we had problems was our Holy Father, our then Holy Father, Pope John Paul II. And cardinals knew it, and bishops knew it, and priests knew it, and religious knew it, and lay people knew it. And what is the main problem? There were a number of problems, but what is the main problem we are talking about? The main problem we're discussing is the problem in catechesis. 20 years had passed since the closing of the Second Vatican Council, and Catholics did not know their faith. Now, there are many of you who will be watching this series who, along with myself, were raised in an era when we studied the Baltimore Catechism. Baltimore Catechism, you know, came to us from the Third Plenary Council of Baltimore in 1883. And it was a marvelous, marvelous tool by which generation after generation, at least of Catholics in the United States, were raised in the faith. Can you remember the sisters lining you up against the wall? And my goodness, you had to have the answers to those catechism questions memorized, and memorized thoroughly. And you'd be scared to death in those days not to have your catechism memorized thoroughly. Well, there came into play a view that said, oh, this is the wrong way to go about it. And other ways were implemented, and other ways failed, and other ways failed miserably. Why? Why did they fail so miserably? Purely and simply because the content of the faith, the in-depth content, beginning with the perception of a little child and continuing all the way up to someone, let us say, who was finishing senior year in high school. The content of the faith was purely and simply diluted. It was not being taught. And we really and truly were producing generation after generation of Catholic illiterates. It was no fault of theirs. They purely and simply were not given the truth. And so, in 1985, as we said, 20 years after the conclusion of the Second Vatican Council, something very, very significant happened in the eternal city of Rome. There was a recommendation made at an extraordinary Synod of Bishops that was held in Rome in 1985. And based on this recommendation, 1 year later, in 1986, Pope John Paul II appointed a commission of cardinals and bishops to develop a compendium of Catholic doctrine. In 1989, the commission sent the text to all of the bishops of the world for consultation. Now, every bishop around the world, or at least most of the bishops around the world, consulted with theological experts, some catechetical experts, but primarily I would say theological experts and scriptural experts as well. Many, many, many people were involved in the overall consultation on this catechism. By 1990, the commission had examined and evaluated over 24,000 amendments suggested by the bishops of the world. The final draft was considerably different from the one that had circulated in the late 1980s. In 1991, the commission prepared the text for the Holy Father's official approval, and in the summer of 1992, John Paul officially approved the definitive version of what we know today as the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And on the feast of Our Lady's Immaculate Conception, December 8th, 1992, Pope John Paul II officially promulgated the Catechism with a specific apostolic constitution. And through the vehicle of this specific apostolic constitution, John Paul II gave the Catechism of the Catholic Church to the entire Catholic world. And what a marvelous, marvelous gift it has been. And what a marvelous gift it is going to continue to be as the years go on. Because at this juncture, we are just slightly more than 2 decades removed from the official promulgation of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Now imagine when we're 4, 5, or 6 decades removed from that official promulgation of the Catechism. That's when we really can begin to test the efficacy of the Catechism of the Catholic Church throughout the United States and throughout the world. Because it's going to take a long period of time, but eventually, my dear friends, you know as well as I, the faith will grow stronger and stronger, and one of the reasons why it will grow stronger and stronger is because people have been sufficiently catechized. So what we have on our hands now, what we have produced, is what we call a major catechism. There are usually 2 kinds of catechisms, major and minor. And before we describe the difference between a major catechism and a minor catechism, we probably ought to answer the question, what is a catechism? A catechism, we are told, is a text which contains the fundamental Christian truths formulated in a way that facilitates their understanding. Now, in the days of the Baltimore Catechism, that was question and answer. In our own time with the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it is not a question and answer format. It is more a paragraph format, but we're going to see very specifically how those paragraphs unfold. It's a major catechism in the sense that it is a primary document from which minor catechisms may evolve. For example, the Baltimore Catechism really was a minor catechism. It would have evolved from the 16th century Catechism of the Council of Trent. That's where the main doctrine of the church was contained, and the Baltimore Catechism, for specific use in the United States, came to us from that major catechism. Well, here we have a major catechism produced in our time, from which, for example, a minor catechism has already been produced. The United States Catholic Catechism for Adults. You don't hear an awful lot about, but it comes to us directly from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. We might also say that we are dealing with a universal catechism. In other words, we are dealing here with a major catechism, which is intended to be a resource tool, a point of reference for the development of national or local catechisms, and also for the development of catechetical materials. Whether we're talking about a major catechism or a minor catechism, what kind of a document are we talking about? And very specifically, what kind of a purpose does the Catechism of the Catholic Church serve? First of all, it conveys the essential and fundamental content of the Catholic faith, and it reveals the content of that faith to us in a complete way and in a summary way. It's revealed to us completely and in summary fashion. Secondly, as we said, it is a point of reference for the development of national and diocesan catechisms. Thirdly, it is a positive, objective, and declarative exposition of Catholic doctrine, and that really and truly is what is needed in our time. And fourth and finally, it is intended to assist all of those who have the duty to catechize, promoters and teachers of catechesis, beginning with the bishop of the diocese and continuing down to all of those who are delegated by the bishop of the diocese to teach the Catholic faith. John Paul II said that the catechism is offered to all the faithful who want to understand better the inexhaustible riches of salvation. It is not a catechism that employs a particular methodology. Methodologies come and go, and they differ. It is rather intended to be a doctrinal tool, a point of reference, as we said, primarily for the development of further work in catechesis, a point of reference for bishops, for priests, for catechists, for teachers, for preachers, for scholars, for students, and for authors. There really are not too many people who are excluded from using the Catechism of the Catholic Church. There really are not too many people for whom the Catechism of the Catholic Church was not intended to be an extraordinarily useful tool. This new catechism produced contains the essential and the fundamental content of our Catholic faith. It presents Catholic doctrine within the context of the Church's history and tradition. And this catechism is divided into four parts, or what we refer to as four pillars. The Catechism of the Council of Trent in the 16th century was also divided into four parts, or four pillars. Now we have the four parts, the four pillars of the Catechism of the Catholic Church in our own time, namely the Creed, the liturgy and sacraments, the moral life, and prayer. And in the course of this series, we shall be looking at all four parts, all four pillars of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is not meant to compete, by the way, with any other documents, but rather to stand alongside the major catechetical documents that have been produced over the years by the various educational congregations of the Church. So we have in our time then an extraordinarily useful tool. We have a tool that has been given to us for the spread of the faith. We have been given a manifestation of God's grace in our midst. Stay with us.
Vi i St Rita Radio ønsker å takke alle våre lyttere som støtter radioen økonomisk. Uten deres støtte vil det ikke være mulig å dreve denne radioen og podcasten.
So the grace of God is extremely evident in these years of the 21st century because of the fact that we have the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It is something that was given to us, as we mentioned earlier, just a bit more than 2 decades ago, and it's going to take a number of years before the full impact will really begin to be felt throughout the Catholic world. Now, there are dozens of ways that you can begin to study the Catechism of the Catholic Church. We are going to use one particular way in this series. And the way we are going to use is a method that has been given to us by one particular institute. I shall be using, in the course of this series, the study guides provided by the Maryvale Institute of Higher Education in Birmingham, England. And I want to, at this point in the program, express my gratitude to all of those at Maryvale who gave their permission for us here at EWTN to use their study guide so that all of you watching may have a deeper appreciation for the Catechism of the Catholic Church. You may remember the great convert Cardinal of England, John Henry Newman. Newman became a Catholic in 1845, and really the first community experience that he had as a Roman Catholic was at Maryvale in the vicinity of the modern-day city of Birmingham in England. In that same building where Newman lived in community is today contained one of the great catechetical institutes of the world, fiercely loyal to the teaching church. And so the titles of these various broadcasts during this series will correspond to the titles that are given in the Maryvale Study Guide for the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And you will see on your screen, under the title of the specific program that we are going to be covering, you will find the listing of the various corresponding paragraphs of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So therefore, if you have your catechism with you as we go through this series, you can look at the sequential development of the paragraphs of the Catechism of the Catholic Church as we are trying to explain them. Now, naturally, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of paragraphs that comprise the Catechism of the Catholic Church. What we are going to do is take chunks of these at a time and discuss them in summary fashion as the Maryvale Institute has provided us the material to discuss them with a television audience. So once again, I'm enormously grateful to Maryvale and most certainly to EWTN for providing this opportunity. The largest portion of the Catechism really treats the content of the faith. That will be found in Book 1. And the second largest amount of material of the Catechism will be found, in Part 1 I should have said, the second largest amount of material will be found in Part 3 of the Catechism, which deals with the moral life. That's rather understandable. The relationship between what one believes and consequently how one lives on account of how one believes is something that is made very clear and something which is forcefully presented in the Catechism. What we believe determines how we live. How we live is based on that which we believe. So remember we said in the first part of the program, there are 4 pillars or 4 parts to the Catechism of the Catholic Church: the Creed, liturgy and sacraments, the moral life, and prayer. We will begin then with the Creed, which is the first part and the largest part of the Catechism, and directly relate that to Part 3, the moral life. Although in this series, we will go sequentially, Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. The Catechism is a tremendous source book, but it's also a tremendous spiritual book. Its spirituality really rests on the foundation of Trinitarian life. We will be bringing in the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, over and over again. The relationships between the persons of the Trinity really provide the model for all human relationships. Some people have suggested, well, we should take Part 4 first and read the part of the Catechism dealing with prayer, because it is based on prayer that everything else follows. That is a good point, although not altogether a necessary point, because if you go through the Catechism sequentially, as we're going to do in this series, you will find the frequent references that are made to the saints, to the spiritual doctors of the church, and so forth, really provide a magnificent compendium to one's own individual spiritual life. In fact, the Catechism really can be read from the point of view of a spiritual journey, a journey in which what the Church believes, what the Church celebrates, what the Church lives, and what the Church prays combines to give us information, spiritual formation, and the hope of being transformed in our own lives by God's grace. The Catechism of the Catholic Church is a marvelous example of Episcopal collegiality. Bishops from around the world join with John Paul II. As we tape this program, Blessed John Paul II, in coming together in agreement with the development of what finally was produced. Obviously, our Holy Father presided over all of the deliberations that led to the production of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and he had in the process, in this collaborative process, the help, the aid, the agreement, and the encouragement of the world's bishops. That is not to say that various opinions, one way or another, were not brought into the question. Of course they are. That's the story of life in general. But in the end, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the end result was a marvelous, marvelous unity. And from the unity that went into the production of the Catechism, the prayer of the Church is that there will be a great, great unity of faith. It's already being seen and will be seen more and more. Many Catholic adults today in the 21st century are searching for a positive, a coherent, and a contemporary statement of what the Church believes and what the Church teaches. And now they have it in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Research has told us that Catholic adults today are better educated than at any time in world history. Now, there's something good about that, but there can be something harmful about it as well, because one can become more educated than the Church, and when that happens, it is a potentially dangerous situation. But nonetheless, we have a high degree of education between men and women, and it is the faith within those same highly educated men and women that makes them want to delve into their faith in far greater detail and to give reasons for the faith that is already in them. It is an invaluable pastoral resource for the average parish priest in the United States and around the world. It offers the Church's teachings in a positive manner, in an expository manner. It avoids argumentation, and we would say, I think, that it does avoid apologetic, and yet it most certainly can be used in an apologetic way. So, for example, if you were a member of the Catholic Evidence Guild and you were standing up explaining the faith in Hyde Park in London or in some park in New York City, you most certainly could have the Catechism of the Catholic Church at your side and turn to that to give particular reasons why you were holding the position you were holding as you continue to defend the faith. It is a book that lends itself very, very easily to teaching, to counseling, and to preaching. Oftentimes when the faithful seek responses to questions concerning doctrinal matters, they will not only find them there in the Catechism, but they will also find that the Catechism is what has been described as a user-friendly resource with much cross-referencing and many indices. You know, there are over 3,000 footnotes in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. There's even a compendium to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is nearly double the size of the Catechism, if you want to do further research in what is being described. Blessed John Paul II said that the Catechism provides the service of supporting and confirming the faith of all the disciples of the Lord Jesus, as well as strengthening the bonds of unity in the same apostolic faith. The Catechism, then, is intended to, as he says, carefully guard the unity of the faith and fidelity to Catholic doctrine. Its intention is to carefully guard the unity of the faith and fidelity to Catholic doctrine. And more than anything else, John Paul II described the Catechism of the Catholic Church ever so beautifully as an instrument for the new evangelization. An instrument for the new evangelization. The new evangelization, which the Pope consistently proclaimed, really involved the transformation of contemporary culture and the personal ongoing conversion of the individual believer. You and me. Our personal ongoing conversion. The Catechism of the Catholic Church presents the message of Christ in its entirety. It presents the message of Christ faithfully. It consistently offers the teaching of the Church in relationship to the person of Jesus Christ, who is at the heart of the Church's beliefs. This is the new evangelization. This is what the Church is about in the 21st century. This is the great, great purpose of this magnificent tool, the Catechism of the Catholic Church.